to adjust the radius a little bit more to facilitate a fire truck that would come in there. And that would just basically widen that radius a little bit. All the buildings are at grade level. There is internal stormwater management. And then along the Perkiomenville roadside and around the buildings on the north side of the site, extending all the way down around to the south side of the site, to the intersection, it is a very elongated, shallow stormwater management facility designed to take the pre-development flows, the post-development flows below a pre-development rate. And during the development of the site, there was a lot of attention focused on a significant amount of perimeter landscaping all around the perimeter that meets the landscaping requirement, actually exceeds it a little bit, and interspersed throughout the site landscaping that again would replicate the farm type community based upon the buildings. There's also depicted on the plan, which is shown in a cross-hatched area along Big Road and Perkiomenville Road, excuse me, which would be a future trail easement. That was a request that was made by the township planner and that we introduced to the plan. Also shown on the plan is 19 parking spaces. That was established during the variance proceeding. As was testified earlier, there's 5 to 6 employees, and then there's also the ability to provide some guest parking. But 14 spaces is what was agreed upon that would be in excess of what the facility would need on a daily basis. It was testified that 14 was a good number. There's really not a specific parking tabulation that goes along with this type of operation. In our assessment, this parking is suitable and exceeds the needs of the daily operations.
Okay. How will the property be serviced as far as water and sewer?
Water is on lot, sewer is on lot. There is an area reserved on the northwest corner of the site that would have a septic system. The usage of the septic would, based upon the population, is very similar to a single-family dwelling. There's really not, there was any showers. There's just some facilities, some bathrooms, restrooms for the employees.
And how much impervious coverage is anticipated on the site, and how does that compare with what is permitted?
The maximum permitted allowable coverage in the CB district is 65%, and we're at 26.5%.
All of the site work that you talked about, the emergency access, stormwater management, and other landscaping, will all of that be done in the initial phases of development of this property?
Yes, that's correct. All of the infrastructure and all of the general grading and installation of impervious will all be done in, we'll call that phase 1. The individual pads where the buildings are would be future construction, but it would be graded, the utilities would be put in place, stormwater downspouts would be extended and stubbed, so that all would have to be done is that the structure itself would be built.
And what uses surround this property?
On the eastern side of Perkiomenville Road is predominantly all residential. There is an existing business on the western side and some combination of residential and commercial businesses on the south side of Big Road.
And in your estimate, as an expert in land planning, will the proposed use be compatible with the surrounding uses?
In the CB district, compared to what some of the other uses that are allowable, this is, but certainly with the architecture, I think it fits in with the surrounding community.
And was in fact an environmental assessment prepared for this property and the proposed use?
Yeah, we did an environmental assessment report for the proposed use. It's just a minimal impact, again, based upon how it will be operated, how it will be utilized.
And is the site access designed to protect roads from undue traffic congestion and hazards?
Again, it's a very low impact use based upon the number of employees, the daily hours of operation, and limited deliveries of cars coming in and going out of the suburb, the trailers coming in. So again, very low impact in terms of traffic.
In your professional opinion, will the proposed use alter the essential character of the neighborhood?
This particular use, no, I don't believe it will.
Will it cause any adverse impact to health, safety, and welfare?
No, given the testimonies that, and how it will be operated, no.
I know a question was asked regarding emergency vehicle circulation through the site. Has that been looked at to analyze the accessibility of these buildings to emergency vehicles?
Yeah, there's a 25-foot wide aisle, our main access coming in off the road that would be conducive to support emergency services. And through the development of the plans, an additional second way in off of Perkiomenville Road would further support the ability to access the site for emergency services in the event of an emergency.
No further questions.
The members of this board have any questions for Mr. Russell?
If you're gonna bring in large vehicles, tractor trailers, I guess, car haulers or something, you say they're minimal, your turn radius here coming out onto Big Road, has that been looked at?
Yes, we used auto turn to simulate that. And how that would work is that the tractor trailer would pull in, the site would proceed forward and then back into, it was actually back into the building and then exit the site. But we did simulate that, and the radii accommodate that movement.
As far as access, we're talking about access for emergency vehicles. If one of these, is there enough access if one of these buildings catches on fire that somebody's going to be able to get water on these buildings?
Yes, all the buildings will be sprinklered, number one. And because of the height and the scale of the buildings, they're all accessible for emergency services if there was a fire.
What I mean is somebody going to be able to get a fire truck close enough to these things to spray water onto it?
I believe that they would, the fire company would put the apparatus in a manner that they would be able to fight the fire without putting the equipment in jeopardy. So yes, I believe that they could support the ability to have equipment close enough to fight the fires,
Okay.
if there wasn't.
I don't think I have any questions.
And my only concern is your access off of Perkiomenville Road is 12 feet.
Approximately.
And you said this is 20, I think 25, if I'm not mistaken, your entrance.
Yeah, that
Pretty much
needs to
right.
be 25 for two-way traffic.
Right.
The emergency access would only be for firefighting equipment. It would be chained off or gated off in some kind of a Knox box.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just, so this, pretty much this whole township is tanker driven, right? There's no piped water in this area, except for a few locations. So if you're gonna have a choke point in here at some point, just from my experience, if you only have a 12-foot egress or entrance into off of Perkiomenville Road, is there any way to consider making that larger? So it's not just that, hey, it's there kind of thing, hey, it's accessible, because and I think the fire chief should be brought in on this, just to make a comment, that if they're gonna access off a big road, that they're gonna get congested in here if they're bringing tankers in and supplying water, even if your potential idea of putting a 25 or 30,000 gallon tank underwater. You follow me?
I do.
So to have all this apparatus in there, there's gonna be, you might be able to get one or two trucks in there, but you might not be able to get them out to circulate tankers through there. That's just my concern.
Understood, and we can further refine the width of that driveway. I think when we simulate the movement of equipment, we would make it to the width that we believe is sufficient. And like I said, I think just the radius needs to be adjusted, but certainly, absolutely. There's no doubt we wouldn't want to look at that one, and there's no doubt that we don't want this to be a safe operation.
No, that's understandable. It's just a couple concerns, maybe
Sure.
they were overlooked or not, I'm not sure, but
What's the title of this township fire official? Is fire marshal or fire?
Fire chief.
Fire chief.
Fire chief within
Well,
I think he's both.
Yeah,
We have one
the,
person
one
who's
of the
both.
fire chiefs does. Okay.
So we do have that as one of the conditions from the planning commission regarding, I guess I shouldn't speak until I've been sworn in.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay, if they're in the bullet points, not everyone is, but yeah, I see that there.
And I did meet with the fire chief slash marshal, and he asked for that access from Perkins and Bill, and felt comfortable if they had that, that circulation through the property would be workable.
If they kept it at 12 feet?
We didn't get into that detail. I think the idea was he would have to look at the details, and that's what the planning commission
Sure.
recommends.
Okay.
So we could impose a condition that would say, you know, emergency access to a width satisfactory to the township from fire marshal slash chief.
We'd be agreeable to that, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Good. So were you done with questioning? Yes, we are all questions here. Any more questions from the board?
No.
If not, members of the audience? Okay, I saw Frank's hand go up first, sorry.
You can go ahead.
Just, would you state your name, please?
Kent Slavin,
What is it, sir?
Kent Slavin, Slavin.
Okay, what is your question?
He showed everything on that diagram there, but he didn't show where the water's gonna exit the whole property.
The stormwater, I presume. you-
Somewhere, yeah.
Yes, so the stormwater will exit through a pipe that is an outlet pipe from the basin that will go into the drainage swale along Perkins Road. And then that water will then go through an existing pipe that goes underneath Perkins Road and continues in a easterly direction through a drainage ditch that's between the properties.
Yeah, my concern is, we're right on that ditch, and we have heavy rains now, and it has a place to go, but it's overgrown, it can't go. And we have our septic system right down there, it's not too far away from the water course. That's my big concern. And they have a pipe that goes under the road now, it's not that large now. If somebody gets in there and says, oh, we need a bigger pipe, it's gonna be more water coming down.
Well, our design is to reduce the runoff in the natural state. So right now it's a field. So we're reducing that. And we, in an earlier discussion when we were at the planning commission meeting, we talked about that the pipe under the road now is a PennDOT pipe. We're not making that any worse. And that we talked about that PennDOT would evaluate that pipe, make sure that it's clear, that there isn't any debris. But we're certainly, our development will not be adding to any of the, maybe the conditions that are there now. We would be reducing them because we're developing our stormwater to be less than what's there now in its current state.
Okay, I don't know, but that's my concern with this water, and we're supposed to get more rain in the future yet. And then we're getting a lot of water now, and nothing's built up there yet. So even if they have holding ponds, no overflow and be more water. So, we'll see. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't get it.
Mr. Slavin, I can tell you that from the planning commission, that was discussed at the planning condition, and this board can impose reasonable conditions, and I suspect that they will address that in their conditions.
Okay.
Any other Frank?
Yes. I know you talked about this. Is there, I don't think there's any deceleration lanes because it's under 6 employees. That was one. And then going back to Mark, is it? Mark. It seemed like the fire system's not quite figured out yet. I heard something about maybe standpipes for some of these buildings or so. So I think with Tom, I think we're all thinking, fire sprinklers are tremendous, you know, almost stops a lot of stuff, but it's a lot of buildings here, and hopefully if you're sprinklered them all, you're gonna have to I guess you have to have a pumping, some setup for pumps to come on and give you that pressure that you need to operate sprinkler heads and all. So that all have to be, so standpipes, maybe that's just where, you brought that up, maybe as a secondary standby. That would only be if everything failed usually.
Mark Myers. Yeah, we have to supply our own water.
Right.
To sprinkle these
Right.
buildings, so
Right.
it's either gonna be an above ground.
No, I like the below ground, there's a couple of them.
Hold on, Frank, one at a time,
Okay.
it's not aggressive, get the homes down in the event there's an appeal. So, that tank would be sized for the largest building, and that tank would service each building. It'd be one pump, and, you know, we would service our buildings with our own pump and our own tank,
Right.
so.
Agreed, like, no, underground's better, and there's several of them in the township.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, it seemed like you weren't quite sure, so that'll all be sized properly. You know, we've had where the pipes are not maybe the right size. Maybe
It will have to be engineered.
Right, right,
We didn't want to get into that until we obviously get approvals, you know.
okay. And go back to, I think that, well, there's two other, I guess there's a fence all around here, this property. Some sort of
Yes.
fence, and then at this Perkiomen, there's gonna be a chain across to stop people from, or is that gonna be like a gate too?
It's either gonna be a chain or a gate, but it's only for, it's just so that it's not a regularly used driveway.
Right, but somehow, because if this was me, I'd want a good secure system, you know, you got a lot of good stuff in there, so. There's, I heard, Knox box or so, I guess there'll be one there, one up here.
Yeah, the fire company needs to have
Right.
access, absolutely.
Right, so that's what's proposed there. And I think the road should be wider. Because you start, God hopes it never happens, but sprinklers fail or something. They don't make these fire trucks smaller anymore, they seem to make them bigger and wider. That's just my thought to put into this.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, no additional comments from the audience then. Mr. Weiner, do you have anything else? You would move to.
No, I move for the addition of exhibits A1 through A9.
Applicant exhibits A1 through A9 admitted without objection. Let's just do then one more thing. I said in the beginning that I would give anyone an opportunity, you know, I thank you because you were to ask, up to this point, questions of these folks. But now would be an opportunity for you to say anything else you have by way of concern or support or opposition to the project. We can do that if there's any need to do so. Mr. Darcy.
I think that it's going to be a well-done project, it's, you know, everything I've seen of his properties and all, so I don't really have nothing to worry about. I think, you know, for those few little concerns, I'm sure he'll look into it.
Very good, thank you. Anything else? All right, without that, I think now at this point we can conclude the proceedings, and I'll direct the board. According to the Municipal Land Code, you have 45 days to render a decision. You don't have to wait any period of time. That would necessitate having to reschedule and reconvene. We do that at the next monthly meeting. But it's also customary and appropriate to deliberate this evening. And render a decision tonight if you're so inclined. You are, you know, it's a one conditional use application. You'll either grant or deny it. If you grant it, you are entitled to impose reasonable conditions. I know a list has been generated from the planning commission. I'm certain that you have that list. It may need to be discussed in some detail and or modified. In response to Mr. Jansky's questions, making this to the satisfaction of the width of the emergency access, to satisfaction of the fire marshal. The deliberations should occur in public. There's an opportunity now, if you're inclined to move forward this evening, we'd just like to get this portion of it, finished. In one proceeding, you can do that. If you had questions of me, of a legal nature, what criteria should you consider, or, is this a reasonable condition or not, we can retire to another room and have a discussion about that in private, but then you should reconvene. And that's only if you feel it's necessary. If you're prepared to move forward at this time, we can do that too. I don't know that we've had a conditional use hearing with me representing the board, and I know Tom is new, and so I'm just trying to kind of lay out what the options are for you and for the audience. A written decision has to take place as well, and I will prepare that, depending on what you do. But you can make a verbal or oral decision tonight if you're so inclined.
I don't like underground tanks, I'll tell you that. It just raises a concern.
The underground tanks, I heard of as a water tank, which I
Yeah,
don't know,
water,
that seemed
right.
essentially harmless. And the other was for propane, and I think basically the propane companies sort of direct whether your tank is underground or above ground. I think at one point they were underground. I don't know now if the common thinking is they're above, but I'm not even sure the applicant, really gets to choose. So it's sort of a state standard.
I'm not opposed to the underground water tank. I think it's better, maybe more aesthetically appealing to the community to drive by than have a tank that sits above the ground. I don't know.
I mean, it's one of those, the concern is if somebody were to sell the property, like this is sold, it's like a thing that's part of disclosure, is that there's an underground tank and sometimes it goes into, could be some issues with that. But usually it's things people store oil underground, or something else, and that's usually what the bigger concern is.
Yeah, I don't.
Right, there's no testimony that they will do that. I think if you wanted to ask the applicant, I don't think that's necessary. There was no testimony that there'll be any underground storage of any oil or gasoline, for that matter. It said the tanks, the mock-up of the gasoline tanks are not functional. They don't pump gasoline.
Right.
They will not store gasoline above or below the ground. That was the testimony.
Okay.
I have a question for you. You represent Mr. Myers, correct?
Yes.
All the properties that he's purchased and refabricated, built upon, has he ever sold any?
For his personal use in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. I'm not,
Steve Shanahan, for Mr. Myers.
I guess my question is directed towards, this is probably something that, is this something that he's going to hold on to?
Oh, yeah.
For a very
Yes, the
long time?
intention is to, this is a legacy property, he intends to own it for some time, yes.
And then is there a way, thank you, is there a way to, with the underground water storage tank, that if the property ever does get sold,